A
Let's see if
pregnant
this
woman
suits you
stands in the
better.
center of a five-star restaurant. Red wine drips from her hair, her face, her
Insane.
beautiful ivory dress. 200 people watch in silence. Not one of them moves to help her. But here's the part that will make your blood boil. Her husband is smiling, not rushing to defend her, not confronting the woman who just assaulted his pregnant wife. He is standing there watching her humiliation, and he is smiling. What Grace does not know yet is that this was not an accident.
We faced
This was not a jealous mistress losing
and today
control.
we celebrate a victory.
This was a trap.
Mother
A carefully
and child
planned
are
conspiracy
strong
to
and
destroy
healthy.
her, take her children, and lock her away forever. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot about her brother, a decorated Marine who protects his family at any cost, and he just landed in New York. What happens next will shock you. It will enrage you, and by the end, it will inspire you. This is a story about betrayal, survival, and the kind of justice that money cannot buy. Stay with me until the end, because the twist at the 45-minute mark changes everything. Now tell me where you are watching from, and drop a comment if you have ever trusted someone who did not deserve it. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this. And if this one hits close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let us begin. The wine hit her like a crimson wave. Grace Eleanor Bennett stood frozen in the center of Belvita restaurant, her ivory maternity dress transforming into a canvas of horror. Red liquid cascaded down her shoulders, soaking through the delicate fabric, pooling in the folds that draped over her 7-month pregnant belly. For 3 heartbeats, time suspended itself. The chandelier seemed to dim. The murmur of 200 guests dissolved into absolute silence. Even the soft piano music stuttered to a halt. She could feel it seeping through to her skin. Cold, violating. The scent of expensive Cabernet filled her nostrils as drops rolled down her face like tears she had not yet permitted herself to cry. Veronica Hale stood before her, an empty wine bottle dangling from manicured fingers, lips curved into a smile that belonged in nightmares. Her red silk dress matched the destruction she had just created. Diamonds glittered at her throat like frozen tears. Now everyone can see what you really are. Veronica's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Nothing. Grace's hands flew instinctively to her stomach. The twins shifted inside her, responding to the sudden spike of stress hormones flooding her system. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to wake up from this nightmare that could not possibly be real. But then her eyes found Adrian across the room, her husband of 4 years, the father of her unborn children, the man who had promised to love and protect her until death parted them. He was smiling. Not the horrified expression of a man watching his pregnant wife be assaulted, not the fury of a husband whose family had been violated. Adrian Whitmore III stood with his hands casually tucked into the pockets of his designer suit, watching the scene unfold with the mild amusement of someone observing a moderately entertaining play. The room began to spin. 6 hours earlier, Grace had believed her life was perfect. She had stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Manhattan penthouse, watching the morning sun paint the city in shades of gold and amber. Her reflection showed a woman who had everything: a beautiful home, a successful husband, 2 babies growing strong inside her. Tonight was supposed to be the culmination of everything they had built together. Adrian was receiving the Young Philanthropist Award at the annual charity gala. Grace had spent weeks preparing her introduction speech, choosing each word carefully to honor the man she loved. She practiced the words one more time, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "Your daddy is going to be so proud tonight," she whispered to the twins. "We are going to show everyone what an amazing family we are." The babies responded with gentle kicks, and Grace smiled at the sensation that never failed to fill her with wonder. She turned to check her appearance one final time. The ivory dress had been custom-made to accommodate her pregnancy while still looking elegant. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Simple diamond earrings caught the light. But as she reached into her jewelry drawer for a bracelet, her fingers brushed against something unexpected: a receipt folded and tucked beneath her earring case. $47,000. Cartier, dated 3 weeks ago. Grace stared at the paper, confusion clouding her features. Adrian had not given her any jewelry recently. Perhaps it was for the charity auction tonight. That had to be it. He was always organizing donations for his various philanthropic endeavors. She tucked the receipt back where she found it and closed the drawer. Her phone buzzed on the vanity. An unknown number. The message contained only 6 words. Ask your husband about Paris. Grace deleted it immediately. Spam. It had to be spam. Adrian had not been to Paris in over a year. She blocked the number and set her phone face down. The bedroom door opened behind her. Adrian entered without greeting, his eyes scanning her appearance with clinical assessment rather than appreciation. He crossed the room and pressed a brief kiss to her cheek, the gesture mechanical and cold. Remember. His voice carried the tone of a man addressing an employee rather than a wife. Tonight is about me. Do not make it about your pregnancy. Grace felt something twist in her chest. Of course, I would never. Good. He adjusted his cufflinks without looking at her. The car will be ready at 6. Try to be on time. He left without another word. Grace stared at the closed door for a long moment. Then she turned back to the mirror and practiced her smile until it no longer looked like it might crack. The first sign your partner does not respect you is not always what they do to you. Sometimes it is what they allow others to do. Sometimes it is the 1,000 small moments when they make you feel invisible. Sometimes it is the way they say your name, or rather, the way they stop saying it altogether. Grace had learned to ignore these signs. She had built elaborate explanations for every cold glance, every dismissive comment, every night he came home late smelling a perfume that was not hers. She told herself it was stress. The pressure of running a real estate empire, the weight of family expectations. She told herself that once the babies arrived, everything would change. He would soften. He would remember why he married her. He would become the man she had fallen in love with during those magical first months when he made her feel like the only woman in the world. But standing in that restaurant, drenched in wine and humiliation, watching her husband smile at her destruction, Grace finally understood the truth she had been running from. She had been wrong about everything. While Grace practiced her speech in the penthouse, a very different conversation was taking place 47 floors below. Adrian's corner office occupied the entire eastern wing of the Whitmore building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Manhattan, a visual reminder of everything his family had built over 4 generations. But Adrian was not admiring the view. Veronica Hale closed the office door behind her, the click of the lock echoing in the silence. She moved with the confidence of a woman who knew exactly how much power she held. Her position as Adrian's executive assistant was merely a cover for the role she actually played in his life. She set a coffee cup on his desk and perched on the edge, crossing her legs in a way that made her skirt ride up several inches. She is still planning to come tonight. Veronica's voice carried a note of irritation. Your pregnant wife. At our gala. Adrian did not look up from his computer screen. She is my prop. I need the pregnant wife visual for the donors. It plays well. Family man dedicating his fortune to children's charities while his own children grow inside his devoted wife. Veronica's jaw tightened. And after the babies are born, what then? Then the plan moves forward exactly as we discussed. He finally looked at her and something cold and calculated flickered behind his eyes. Postnatal depression is remarkably common. Adrian's voice remained casual, as though discussing a minor business transaction, especially in women who have experienced significant stress during pregnancy. A few documented incidents, some carefully curated medical opinions, and within 6 months, Grace will be receiving treatment at a very comfortable private facility. Veronica's smile returned. And you will have full custody, and all marital assets remain under my control. Adrian leaned back in his chair. It is really quite simple when you understand how the system works. Money does not just buy things, Veronica. It buys outcomes. What about her brother? For the first time, a flicker of something resembling caution crossed Adrian's face. Marcus Bennett was not a man to be dismissed lightly. A decorated Marine Corps veteran with a Purple Heart and enough combat experience to make him genuinely dangerous. After leaving the military, Marcus had built one of the most respected private security firms on the East Coast. His client list included Fortune 500 executives, foreign diplomats, and several individuals whose names never appeared in any public records. Marcus is in Dubai. Adrian's confidence returned quickly. A security contract that will keep him occupied for at least another 2 weeks. By the time he returns, Grace will already be institutionalized. Everything will be legal. Everything will be documented. He will have no grounds for intervention. Veronica traced a finger along his jaw. You really have thought of everything. I always do. But even as Adrian spoke those words with absolute certainty, he could not have known that 12,000 miles away, Marcus Bennett was already changing his flight. The video call had lasted only 4 minutes. Grace had smiled and insisted everything was fine. She had used the exact same tone and the exact same words she used when their mother was dying of cancer, and she did not want anyone to worry. Marcus had survived 3 combat tours by learning to trust his instincts, and every instinct he possessed was screaming that his sister was in danger. He stood in his Dubai hotel suite, phone pressed to his ear. Move my flight. His voice left no room for negotiation. I need to be in New York by tomorrow evening. Sir, the contract here requires your presence for at least another. I said move it. Find someone to cover. I will deal with the client personally if there are complaints. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. This one was answered on the first ring by a woman whose voice carried the clipped efficiency of someone accustomed to managing crises. Elena. Marcus kept his voice low. I need you to do something for me. Elena Martinez had worked at Belvita restaurant for 22 years. She had started as a busser at 23, worked her way up to head server, and along the way had developed an unparalleled ability to read the wealthy patrons who frequented the establishment. She knew which marriages were falling apart before the couples themselves admitted it. She knew which business deals were actually money laundering operations. She knew which smiling philanthropists went home and beat their wives. She also happened to be one of Marcus Bennett's most trusted civilian contacts, a friendship that had begun when Marcus provided security for her son after the young man witnessed a gang shooting. Elena never forgot those who protected her family. The Whitmore Gala is tonight. Marcus continued, my sister will be there. Her name is Grace. She is pregnant, and I think her husband is planning something. Elena's response was immediate. I will watch her personally. If anything happens, if anything seems wrong, you call me immediately. Consider it done. Marcus ended the call and stared out at the Dubai skyline. Something was very wrong. He could feel it in his bones with the same certainty he had felt before every ambush in Afghanistan. He just hoped he would not be too late. Back in Manhattan, Grace had no idea that protective forces were already mobilizing on her behalf. She rode the elevator down from the penthouse, her carefully prepared speech tucked into her clutch, her practiced smile firmly in place. The car was waiting. Adrian was not inside. He is meeting us there, the driver explained. Business call ran long. Of course it did. Grace settled into the leather seat and watched the city pass by through tinted windows. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the twins move in their now familiar patterns. The one on the left was always more active in the evenings. The one on the right seemed to respond to music, kicking whenever Grace played piano. She had already chosen their names. Oliver and Charlotte, traditional names that honored both their heritages. She had painted their nursery in soft greens and yellows, gender-neutral colors that would work regardless of which twin was which. She had done everything right. So why did it feel like everything was falling apart? The car pulled up to Belvita restaurant, and Grace pushed her doubts aside. Tonight was about Adrian, about their family, about showing the world the life they had built together. She stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance, unaware that she was walking into a trap that had been months in the making. Belvita restaurant had been transformed into a wonderland of crystal and candlelight. 200 of Manhattan's elite filled the space, their designer gowns and tailored suits creating a sea of wealth and privilege. Champagne flowed freely. Laughter echoed off marble walls. The soft notes of a grand piano provided elegant background music. Grace stood near the entrance, feeling invisible despite being the wife of the evening's honoree. Guests flowed past her without acknowledgement, their eyes sliding over her pregnant form as though she were merely another decoration. She spotted Adrian across the room, surrounded by admirers and well-wishers. Veronica Hale stood at his elbow, laughing at something he said, her hand resting on his arm with an intimacy that made Grace's stomach clench. Just his assistant. Grace reminded herself, that is all she is. But even as she formed the thought, she knew it was a lie. The same lie she had been telling herself for months. A server approached with a tray of sparkling water. The woman appeared to be in her mid-40s, with kind eyes and the efficient movements of someone who had spent decades perfecting her craft. "Honey, you look like you need something stronger." The server's voice was warm and conspiratorial, but given the situation, she gestured toward Grace's belly. "This will have to do." Grace accepted the glass with a grateful smile. "Is it that obvious?" The server, whose name tag read Elena, leaned slightly closer. "Sugar, I have been serving rich people for 22 years. I can smell trouble from the kitchen." "And that woman in red," she nodded subtly toward Veronica. "She has got 'sleeping with your husband' written all over her Louboutins." Grace nearly choked on her water. The bluntness was so unexpected, so refreshingly honest, that she did not know whether to laugh or crim. Elena's expression softened. "Word of advice, keep your receipts. Not the ones from shopping, the ones that prove you are not crazy." Before Grace could respond, Elena was already moving away, disappearing into the crowd with practiced invisibility. The evening proceeded with excruciating slowness. Grace made small talk with donors who looked past her while speaking. She smiled until her face ached. She answered the same questions about her due date, and whether she was having twins, yes, and whether she knew the genders, not yet, and whether she was excited, absolutely. Finally, the moment arrived for her speech. Grace climbed the small stage at the front of the room, her heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and the desperate hope that this moment would somehow fix everything. If she could just show everyone what a perfect couple they were. If she could just make Adrian proud. She gripped the podium and began to speak. "Good evening, everyone. It is my honor to introduce my husband, the man who has dedicated his life to making our community a better place. Adrian Whitmore has donated millions to children's hospitals, education initiatives, and family support programs. But what many of you do not know is that his commitment to family extends far beyond his charitable work." She glanced at Adrian, hoping to see warmth in his eyes. He was checking his phone. Grace pressed on, her voice wavering only slightly. "As we prepare to welcome our twins into the world, I am constantly reminded of why I fell in love with this man. His generosity, his vision, his unwavering commitment to building a legacy that matters." The words tasted like ash in her mouth, but she delivered them flawlessly. "Please join me in congratulating this year's Young Philanthropist Award recipient, my husband, Adrian Whitmore III." Applause filled the room. Adrian set down his phone and climbed the stage with the easy confidence of a man who believed he deserved every accolade he received. He accepted the crystal trophy, kissed Grace's cheek for the cameras, and leaned close enough to whisper, "See, you can be useful when you try." Grace's smile froze. She stepped aside as Adrian launched into his acceptance speech, his words washing over her without meaning. The crowd laughed at his jokes and nodded at his insights, completely charmed by the performance of a man Grace was beginning to realize she had never truly known. When the speech concluded, Grace slipped away toward the restroom. She needed a moment, just one moment to breathe without an audience, but she never reached her destination. Veronica intercepted her in the hallway, blocking the path with a predatory smile. "That was a lovely speech." Veronica's voice dripped with false sweetness. "Really? You almost sounded like you believed it." Grace straightened her spine. "I do not have anything to say to you." She tried to step around Veronica, but the other woman moved to block her again. "That is because you do not have anything." Veronica's mask of pleasantry dropped, revealing something cold and cruel beneath. "You are a placeholder, Grace. A vessel. Once those babies are born, you are gone." Grace felt the blood drain from her face. "What did you say?" "You heard me." Veronica lifted the wine glass she had been holding, and before Grace could react, tilted it deliberately. Red wine splashed across Grace's shoulder, soaking into the ivory fabric, spreading like a wound across her chest. Grace gasped, stumbling backward. The cold liquid seeped through to her skin, and for a horrifying moment, the dark red stain looked exactly like blood against the pale dress. Veronica examined her now empty glass with theatrical innocence. "Oops, clumsy pregnant woman. You really should watch where you are going." Grace stood frozen, her mind refusing to process what had just happened. This woman, her husband's assistant, had just deliberately assaulted her in the hallway of a restaurant filled with 200 witnesses. "You." Grace's voice emerged as barely a whisper. You did that on purpose. Veronica's smile widened. Prove it. She turned and walked away, leaving Grace standing alone in the hallway, wine dripping onto the marble floor, her perfect evening shattered beyond repair. Grace stumbled back into the main dining room, one hand pressed to her stained dress, the other wrapped protectively around her belly. Her mind raced with fragments of disbelief. What had just happened? Why had it happened? What was she supposed to do now? Conversation stuttered to silence as guests noticed her appearance. Heads turned, whispers began. Someone gasped audibly. Grace searched the room desperately for Adrian. He was already walking toward her, and for one brief moment, hope flickered in her chest. He would help her. He would be outraged at what Veronica had done. He would defend his wife. But when Adrian reached her, his expression showed only irritation. He grabbed her arm, pulling her slightly toward him, his voice low and sharp. What did you do? Grace stared at him in disbelief. What did I do? Adrian, she poured wine on me. Your assistant poured wine on me deliberately. Adrian sighed heavily, the sound of a man dealing with an unreasonable child. Grace, please. You need to calm down. You are making a scene. I am making a scene. Grace's voice rose despite her efforts to control it. I am covered in wine. She attacked me. Adrian turned to the nearby guests, his expression shifting to one of apologetic concern. I am so sorry about this. My wife has not been herself lately. The pregnancy has been very difficult for her. A woman nearby nodded sympathetically. Oh, that is so hard. Hormones can really affect some women. Grace felt her grip on reality beginning to slip. This was not happening. Her husband was not standing in front of witnesses explaining away her assault as a pregnancy symptom. Adrian, please. Her voice cracked. Look at my dress. Look at what she did. But Adrian was already shaking his head. You tripped, Grace. Veronica tried to catch you and her wine spilled. It was an accident. I saw the whole thing. The lie was so blatant, so completely divorced from reality, that Grace could not formulate a response. Veronica appeared at Adrian's side, her timing suspiciously perfect. Is she okay? Her voice oozed false concern. I tried to help when she stumbled, but she pushed me away. I hope the wine did not ruin her dress. Grace looked between them, her husband and his mistress standing united against her, and something inside her finally cracked. You are lying. Grace's words came out stronger now, fueled by a desperation that overrode her fear. Both of you. You are lying, and everyone here can see it. Adrian's eyes flashed with warning. Lower your voice. No, Grace pulled her arm from his grip. I will not lower my voice. I will not pretend this did not happen. I will not let you gaslight me in front of 200 people. The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on the drama unfolding in their midst. Phones had appeared in several hands. Cameras pointed at the confrontation. Adrian's expression hardened into something Grace had never seen before. Something cold and cruel and entirely without love. Grace. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly in the silence. If you do not stop this immediately, there will be consequences. Do you understand me? Consequences. The threat hung in the air between them. Grace wanted to scream. She wanted to grab him and shake him and demand to know what had happened to the man she married. But her body would not cooperate. The stress, the humiliation, the shock of betrayal had combined into a paralysis she could not overcome. Elena appeared at her elbow, pressing a napkin into her hand. Here, honey, let me help you clean up. Grace accepted the napkin numbly, dabbing at the wine stains without any real hope of improvement. Elena leaned close, her lips barely moving. I saw what happened. Everything. You are not crazy. The words were a lifeline in a sea of gaslighting. Grace met Elena's eyes and found only kindness and truth. There are cameras, Elena continued in that same barely audible whisper. Security cameras in every hallway. Whatever she did is on tape. Hope surged through Grace's chest. Cameras, evidence, proof that she was not imagining things, not overreacting, not suffering from pregnancy-induced paranoia. She turned back to Adrian, a new determination straightening her spine. There are security cameras. Her voice rang clear across the silent room. Whatever happened in that hallway is recorded. Adrian's expression flickered. Just for a moment. just long enough for Grace to see the fear beneath his arrogance. But he recovered quickly. Of course there are cameras, and they will show exactly what I said, that you stumbled and Veronica accidentally spilled her wine. We will see about that. Grace turned and walked toward the back of the restaurant, toward the manager's office where the security footage would be stored. Her heart pounded with something that felt almost like hope. She had evidence, she had a witness. This nightmare was about to end. She was wrong. When someone is gaslighting you, they do not just lie about what happened. They anticipate your attempts to prove the truth, and they eliminate them before you even think to look. They are always 3 steps ahead because they have been planning while you have been trusting. The restaurant manager was a thin man in an expensive suit with the nervous eyes of someone caught between powerful forces. He looked up as Grace entered his office, and his expression immediately shifted to discomfort. "Mrs. Whitmore." His voice was too high, too careful. "How can I help you? I need to see the security footage from the back hallway." Grace kept her voice steady. "There was an incident involving another guest, and I want to review what was recorded." The manager's hands fidgeted with a pen on his desk. "About that. Mrs. Whitmore, I understand you are upset. I am not upset. I am requesting access to security footage that will prove I was assaulted." The manager swallowed visibly. "The thing is, the cameras in that particular hallway were." He paused, searching for words. "They were undergoing maintenance tonight. There is no footage from that area." Grace felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "Maintenance, yes. Scheduled maintenance. Very unfortunate timing. That is convenient." The manager could not meet her eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think perhaps you should go home and rest. For the sake of your babies." Grace stared at him, understanding dawning with sickening clarity. Adrian owned 40% of this restaurant. The manager was not going to help her. The evidence she needed had been deliberately destroyed. She turned and walked out of the office on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Adrian was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. "I told you there would be consequences for making a scene." His voice was almost gentle, almost kind, as if he were explaining something to a child who should have known better. "Now, are you ready to behave? Or do I need to call our doctor and discuss your concerning behavior?" Grace looked at him, this stranger who wore her husband's face, and felt the last of her hope crumble to dust. Grace had reached her breaking point. She no longer cared about the gala or the award or the 200 guests who would gossip about her breakdown for weeks. She no longer cared about preserving her marriage or protecting Adrian's reputation. She only wanted to leave, to get home, to lock herself in the nursery she had so carefully prepared and cry until she had no tears left. She headed for the exit, her wine-stained dress leaving a trail of pitying glances in her wake. Just a few more steps, just a few more seconds, and she would be outside, away from the chandeliers and the champagne and the cruel smile of the woman who had stolen her husband. Veronica stepped into her path. "You cannot leave yet." Her voice carried across the room, deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. "The party is just getting started." Grace stopped. "Move." "Why?" Veronica tilted her head with mock innocence. "So you can run home and cry. So you can play victim to anyone who will listen." I said move. Make me. The two women stood facing each other, and Grace became aware that the entire restaurant had once again fallen silent. This confrontation was being witnessed by everyone, recorded by everyone. Whatever happened next would be impossible to deny or explain away. Grace tried to step around Veronica, but the other woman grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "You know what your problem is, Grace." Veronica's voice dropped to a vicious whisper. "You still think you matter. You still think you have some claim on him. But let me tell you something. Adrian has not loved you for a very long time. Maybe he never did. Let go of me. He tells me everything, you know, every detail of your pathetic marriage. How you beg for his attention. How you cry when he stays late at the office. How you have separate bedrooms because he cannot stand to touch you anymore." Grace felt each word land like a physical blow, tearing at wounds she had tried so hard to hide. "You are lying, am I?" Veronica released her arm and reached for something on a nearby server's tray. A full bottle of wine, its dark contents glinting under the chandelier light. You should see the texts he sends me, the photos, the voice messages where he tells me how much he wishes he had met me first. Grace saw the bottle rising but could not seem to move. Time slowed to a crawl as Veronica lifted the wine above her head. Now everyone can see what you really are. The bottle tipped. Red wine cascaded over Grace's head, drenching her hair, flooding her face, soaking through her dress to her skin. The cold was shocking. The humiliation was absolute. She stood in the center of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurant, 7 months pregnant, covered in wine, while 200 people watched in horrified silence. Someone screamed. A waiter dropped a tray, the crash of breaking glass punctuating the chaos. Grace could feel the wine running into her eyes, stinging and blinding her. She could feel it soaking through to her belly, pressing cold against the place where her children grew. She could hear the taps and the whispers and the click of camera phones capturing her destruction. But above it all, she heard Adrian's voice. "You see what you caused." He was not yelling, but his words carried clearly through the room. "You provoked her. You made this happen." Grace wiped wine from her eyes and stared at her husband in utter disbelief. "I provoked her. I was trying to leave. You should have left quietly. You should have accepted your role. But you had to make a spectacle. You had to embarrass me in front of everyone." Grace's legs began to shake. The stress of the evening combined with the physical shock of the second attack. Her body was reaching its limit. "Someone call an ambulance." Elena's voice cut through the chaos. "She is pregnant. She needs medical attention." "She is fine." Adrian's dismissive tone made several guests flinch. "She is just being dramatic. She has been this way for months." But Grace was not fine. A sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. Her hands flew to her belly as another wave of cramping seized her muscles. The twins were responding to her distress, and for the first time, she feared for their safety. "Something is wrong." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Adrian, something is wrong with the babies." She looked at him, pleading, desperate, hoping that somewhere beneath the cruelty there remained a shred of the man who had once promised to protect her. Adrian looked at his watch. "The gala is not over for another 2 hours. We will discuss your health later." Grace felt her knees buckle. Elena was at her side in an instant, steadying her. Then another server appeared, and another, a wall of restaurant staff surrounding the pregnant woman, protecting her from the husband who would not. "Call 911. Elena's voice was sharp with command. "Now, do not call anyone." Adrian stepped forward, anger finally cracking his composure. "This is my wife. I will decide what she needs." Elena turned to face him, and something in her expression made Adrian stop short. "I have been working in this restaurant for 22 years, Mr. Whitmore. I have watched your assistant assault this woman twice tonight. I have seen your shameful treatment of your pregnant wife. And I do not care how much money you have or how many fancy awards hang on your wall. If you think I am going to let you hurt her any more tonight, you are very much mistaken." Adrian's mouth opened and closed. No one had ever spoken to him this way. No one had ever dared. Someone already called. Another server spoke up, phone in hand. "Paramedics are on the way." Grace felt the world beginning to dim at the edges. The pain in her abdomen was intensifying. The shock was overwhelming her system. She reached for Elena's hand and held on as though it were the only solid thing in a universe that had lost all meaning. The last thing she saw before the paramedics arrived was Adrian's face, twisted with fury, and Veronica at his side, whispering something in his ear. She did not hear what was said, but if she had, she would have known that her nightmare was far from over. The hospital room was white and sterile and utterly devoid of comfort. Grace lay in the narrow bed, monitors beeping softly around her, an IV line snaking into her arm. The twins had stabilized. Her vitals had normalized. The doctor had assured her that while the stress was concerning, her babies were not in immediate danger. But Grace could not relax. Something was wrong. Something beyond the obvious horror of the evening. She could feel it in the way the nurses avoided her eyes, in the hushed conversations that stopped whenever she looked in their direction. She reached for her phone to call Marcus, but her purse was not on the bedside table. She must have left it in the ambulance, or someone had taken it. A doctor entered the room, but he was not the kind-faced obstetrician who had examined her earlier. This man was older, with gray at his temples and an expression that seemed carefully neutral. Mrs. Whitmore, his voice was professional, without warmth. How are you feeling? Better. Grace pushed herself up slightly. Where is my phone? I need to contact my family. That will not be necessary. The doctor consulted a clipboard in his hands. Your husband has already been notified of your condition. Grace felt ice form in her stomach. Where is Adrian? He is speaking with administration about your care plan. My care plan, what does that mean? The doctor did not answer directly. Instead, he stepped aside and two people Grace had never seen before and entered the room. A man and a woman, both dressed in professional suits, both carrying tablets and official-looking folders. Mrs. Whitmore. The woman spoke first, her voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. My name is Dr. Helen Carter. I am from Adult Protective Services. This is my colleague, James Miller. We need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your well-being. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. Concerns? What concerns? Doctor, Carter glanced at her tablet. Your husband has filed a petition for emergency psychiatric evaluation. He has provided documentation suggesting you have been experiencing paranoid delusions and erratic behavior. The room tilted. Grace gripped the bed rails to steady herself. He did what? According to Mr. Whitmore, you have been making unfounded accusations against his assistant. You have become aggressive and confrontational in public settings. You have shown signs of dissociation and emotional instability. That is not true. Grace's voice cracked. None of that is true. He is lying. He is trying to. Mrs. Whitmore, please stay calm. James Miller's voice was soothing in a way that made Grace's skin crawl. Getting agitated will only. I am not agitated. Grace's hands began to shake. I am telling you the truth. My husband is having an affair with his assistant. She assaulted me tonight, twice, in front of 200 witnesses. There are videos. Carter made a note on her tablet. Mr. Whitmore mentioned you might say something like this. He described it as a fixed delusion centered on perceived infidelity. Grace stared at them, understanding crashing over her like a wave. This was the plan. This had always been the plan. Adrian had not just been having an affair. He had been building a case, documenting her supposed instability, preparing for exactly this moment. The more she protested, the more unstable she would appear. The more she insisted she was telling the truth, the more her denial would be interpreted as evidence of delusion. It was a perfect trap, and she had walked directly into it. Have you ever felt the walls closing in around you? Have you ever screamed the truth into a void that refused to listen? Have you ever watched as every word out of your mouth was twisted into evidence of your own madness? This is what it feels like to be gaslit by the system that is supposed to protect you. Grace forced herself to stop speaking. She closed her mouth. She controlled her breathing. She pushed down the panic that threatened to overwhelm her and reached for the lawyer that still lived somewhere inside the woman she used to be. Her voice, when she spoke again, was calm and measured. I want a lawyer. I am invoking my right to counsel. I will not answer any questions without legal representation. Dr. Carter and James Miller exchanged glances. This was not the reaction they had expected. Mrs. Whitmore, it is Ms. Bennett. Grace's spine straightened. And I would like it noted that my husband, who filed this petition, is the same man who allowed his mistress to assault me in front of 200 witnesses tonight. There are recordings. There are videos posted to social media. Check the hashtags from Belvita Restaurant. Check the news. This is not paranoia. This is documented fact. James Miller shifted uncomfortably. We were told. I do not care what you were told. Grace met his eyes without flinching. I am telling you what happened, and I am telling you that I will not submit to any evaluation until I have spoken with my attorney. The room fell silent. Then Dr. Carter nodded slowly. You have that right, Ms. Bennett. We will give you time to arrange legal representation. They turned to leave, but Grace called after them. One more thing. How did my husband file this petition so quickly? I have only been here for 2 hours. Dr. Carter paused at the door. Her expression flickered with something that might have been doubt. The paperwork was. She hesitated. It was already prepared. He said he had been concerned about you for some time. The door closed behind them. Grace lay back against the pillows, her heart pounding, her mind racing. Adrian had prepared the paperwork in advance. He had known exactly what would happen tonight because he had orchestrated it. The assault, the public breakdown, the medical emergency. Everything had been designed to land her exactly where she was now. Alone, isolated, facing institutionalization. But he had made one mistake. He had assumed she would break. Grace reached for the hospital phone on her bedside table. Her hands were steady as she dialed the only number she had ever memorized besides her own. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Grace, where are you? What happened?" "I am at Mount Sinai." Grace kept her voice low. "Adrian is trying to have me committed. He filed a psychiatric petition. He planned the whole thing, Marcus. Everything that happened tonight." "I know." Marcus's voice was grim. "I am already on my way. I landed 2 hours ago. I am bringing someone with me. Someone who is going to help." "Who?" "Remember Catherine Ashford, the family attorney? One of the most respected family law specialists in New York. The woman who had helped their mother navigate her estate before she died. She is meeting me at the hospital." Marcus continued. "Do not talk to anyone else until we get there. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything." Grace felt tears sting her eyes. Not from my fear this time. From relief. "I will not." "Grace, I need you to listen to me. You are going to have to get through this. You are not alone. And that son of a bitch is going to pay for what he has done." "I know. We will be there in 20 minutes. Can you hold on?" Grace looked around the sterile hospital room. She thought about everything she had endured, everything she had survived, everything that still lay ahead. "I have been holding on for 4 years," she said quietly. 20 more minutes is nothing." Marcus Bennett walked into Mount Sinai Hospital like a force of nature. He had traded his military bearing for civilian clothes, but there was no disguising what he was. The confidence in his stride, the watchful assessment of every corner and corridor, the way other people instinctively moved out of his path. Behind him came Catherine Ashford, a silver-haired woman in her 60s who carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had won more impossible cases than most lawyers attempted in a lifetime. Her reputation preceded her. Insurance companies settled rather than face her in court. Corporations rewrote policies rather than defend against her arguments. And right now, her entire formidable attention was focused on one case. They reached Grace's room to find 2 hospital security guards stationed outside the door. "I am sorry, sir," one of them stepped forward. "No visitors at this time." Marcus did not slow down. "I am her brother. This is her attorney. Step aside." Mr. Whitmore gave specific instructions. Marcus stopped close enough that the guard had to look up to meet his eyes. "Let me explain something to you." His voice was perfectly calm, perfectly controlled, perfectly terrifying. "My sister is being held in this hospital against her will on the basis of a fraudulent psychiatric petition filed by a man who is currently under investigation for financial crimes. If you do not step aside in the next 3 seconds, I will file false imprisonment charges against this hospital, against you personally, and against everyone else who enabled this situation." The guard's face went pale. 2 seconds. Catherine Ashford cleared her throat delicately. "Perhaps you should check with your supervisor. I am sure they will want to verify that proper procedures were followed before this situation escalates further." The guards exchanged glances. Then they stepped aside. Marcus pushed open the door and found Grace sitting up in bed, her expression shifting from exhaustion to overwhelming relief. "Marcus." He crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around her as gently as his protective instincts would allow. "I am here. I have got you. It is going to be okay." Grace held on to him and let herself feel for the first time in hours like someone was on her side. Catherine Ashford closed the door behind them and immediately began removing documents from her briefcase. "Ms. Bennett, we do not have much time. I have already filed an emergency motion to dismiss the psychiatric petition. I have also filed a restraining order against your husband and Veronica Hale. But I need to know everything that happened tonight, every detail." Grace wiped her eyes and nodded. "Where do I want me to start?" "The beginning." So Grace told her story, every moment, every word, every act of cruelty and betrayal. Catherine took notes without interrupting, her expression revealing nothing. When Grace finished, Catherine looked up from her tablet. I have 17 videos from tonight's gala that were posted to social media before they could be suppressed. 7 of them clearly show Ms. Hale deliberately pouring wine on you. 4 of them capture your husband's subsequent threats. The hashtag Justice for Grace is already trending. Grace blinked in surprise. It is. Elena Martinez has been busy. Marcus's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. She coordinated with the other servers to document everything. She also reached out to several guests who were willing to provide statements. Elena, Grace remembered the kind woman who had offered her water and wisdom. She is your contact. You knew her before tonight. I helped her family years ago. Marcus did not elaborate. She never forgot. And tonight she made sure you did not face this alone. Catherine continued, her voice brisk with professional efficiency. I also have financial records showing your husband has been transferring marital assets into offshore accounts for the past 6 months. Additionally, I have a recorded phone conversation between Adrian Whitmore and Veronica Hale discussing their plans to institutionalize you and gain custody of your children. Grace stared at her. How did you get that? Your husband made the mistake of having that conversation in his office, which is located in a building owned by one of Marcus's security clients. A client who was more than happy to provide access to the relevant recordings once the nature of the situation was explained. The full picture was coming into focus now. The trap that Adrian had built so carefully was being dismantled piece by piece. What happens now? Grace asked. Now. Catherine straightened her papers with decisive movements. We go on a fence. 30 minutes later, Dr. Carter and James Miller returned to Grace's room. They were accompanied by the hospital administrator and a very nervous-looking attorney for the hospital's legal department. Catherine Ashford met them at the door. Before anyone speaks, I want to make something clear. My client will not be submitting to any psychiatric evaluation. She will not be detained. And if anyone attempts to enforce the fraudulent petition filed by her husband, they will be named in a lawsuit that will make headlines for months. The hospital attorney cleared his throat. Ms. Ashford, perhaps we can discuss this. Certainly. Catherine smiled, and there was nothing warm about it. Let us discuss the fact that your hospital accepted a psychiatric commitment petition from a man who is documented on video enabling the assault of his pregnant wife. Let us discuss the fact that this petition was prepared before tonight's events even occurred. Let us discuss the hospital's liability for facilitating what amounts to attempted kidnapping. The administrator's face went gray. We had no way of knowing. You had every way of knowing. You simply did not bother to check. Catherine handed over a folder thick with documents. Here are the videos from tonight. Here are the financial records showing premeditated planning. Here is the recorded conversation proving conspiracy. And here is my motion to dismiss the petition, which I expect will be granted within the hour. Dr. Carter reviewed the materials in silence. When she looked up, her expression had changed entirely. Ms. Bennett, her voice held genuine remorse. I apologize. We should have verified the claims before proceeding. She shook her head. This is not how we do things. Grace met her eyes. I understand you were trying to help. Just please make sure this does not happen to anyone else. Dr. Carter nodded slowly. I will personally see to it. The hospital staff filed out, leaving Grace alone with Marcus and Catherine. Is it over? Grace asked quietly. Catherine began packing her briefcase. The psychiatric petition is effectively dead. The restraining order should be granted by morning. Your husband's assets are being frozen pending investigation of the offshore transfers, and the police are very interested in speaking with Ms. Hale about assault charges. Marcus sat on the edge of Grace's bed, his expression serious. Adrian is going to fight back. Men like him do not accept defeat easily. I know. Grace placed her hand on her belly, feeling the twins stir beneath her palm. But I am not afraid of him anymore. Good. Marcus's voice softened. Because tomorrow we are going to finish this, and that bastard is going to learn what happens when you hurt my family. The morning after the worst night of her life, Grace Bennett held a press conference. She stood on the steps of the hospital, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward her face, wearing a simple blue dress that Elena had brought her that morning. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was free of makeup except for the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She looked exactly like what she was. A pregnant woman who had been through hell and survived. Catherine Ashford stood at her side. Marcus positioned himself slightly behind her, a protective presence that needed no explanation. The crowd of reporters fell silent as Grace stepped up to the improvised podium. "My name is Grace Eleanor Bennett." Her voice was clear and steady, carrying across the assembled crowd without amplification. "Last night, my husband's mistress assaulted me while I was 7 months pregnant with twins. She poured wine on me twice in front of 200 witnesses. When I tried to speak up, my husband called me crazy. He tried to have me committed. He planned to steal my children." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Camera flashes intensified. Grace continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I want to be very clear about something. I am not a victim. I am a witness. I am someone who was told over and over that what I saw and what I felt was not real. I was told I was paranoid. I was told I was hormonal. I was told I was imagining things." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "But I was not imagining things, and I have evidence." Behind her, Catherine handed out press packets containing videos, financial records, and the damning audio recording that proved everything Grace was saying. "My husband and his mistress conspired to destroy me. They planned to take my children and lock me away so they could live the life I was supposed to have. And they almost succeeded. They almost succeeded because our system is designed to believe powerful men over vulnerable women. They almost succeeded because money can buy silence, and evidence can be destroyed, and truth can be buried under expensive lawyers and carefully crafted lies." Grace's voice cracked, but she pressed on. "Almost, but not quite. Because I had people who believed me. A server at a restaurant who saw what happened and refused to stay silent. A brother who dropped everything to stand beside me. An attorney who fights for justice even when it is hard." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I am standing here today because I am one of the lucky ones. I had resources. I had support. I had people willing to risk their own comfort to help me. But there are millions of women who do not have those things. Women who are being gaslit right now. Women who are being told they are crazy while their partners systematically destroy them. Women who have no one to believe them and nowhere to turn. This is for them." Grace looked directly into the cameras, her gaze unwavering. "If you are watching this and you see yourself in my story, I need you to know something. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. What you feel is real. What you see is real. And no matter how powerful the person that hurting you seems, the truth is more powerful. Document everything. Tell someone you trust, and never ever let them make you believe you do not deserve to be safe." She stepped back from the podium and the questions began. "Ms. Bennett, what charges is your husband facing?" Catherine Ashford stepped forward to answer. "Mr. Whitmore is being investigated for financial fraud, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, and witness tampering. Ms. Hale is facing assault charges and is currently in custody after attempting to flee the country. Will you be seeking a divorce?" Grace answered this one herself. "I will be seeking the dissolution of a marriage that was built on lies. I will be seeking full custody of my children. And I will be seeking justice for every woman who has been gaslit by a man who believed his money made him untouchable." The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Grace answered each one with calm precision, refusing to be drawn into emotional reactions, refusing to give anyone ammunition to use against her. When it was over, Marcus guided her to a waiting car, shielding her from the lingering cameras with his body. "You did good." His voice was quiet as they settled into the back seat. "Mom would be proud." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "I keep thinking about what she would say. If she could see all of this, she would say you were always the strong one." Marcus took her hand, even when you did not know it. The car pulled away from the hospital, leaving the chaos behind. But Grace knew the fight was not over. Adrian would not go quietly. Men like him never did. She just had to be ready when he struck back. The following weeks unfolded like dominoes falling. Adrian Whitmore III, golden boy of Manhattan real estate, found his carefully constructed life dismantling itself piece by piece. First came the business partners. One by one, they issued statements distancing themselves from his name. Projects were canceled. Contracts were voided. The Whitmore brand, built over 4 generations, became toxic overnight. Then came the board. An emergency meeting was called. A vote was taken. Adrian was removed as CEO of his own company, escorted from the building he had walked through like a king for over a decade. His father, Richard Whitmore Sr., appeared on camera outside the family estate. His expression showed something Grace had never expected to see. Shame. I am horrified by my son's actions. The elder Whitmore's voice was heavy with regret. I am establishing a trust fund for my grandchildren, managed independently of their father. And I want to publicly apologize to Grace Bennett for the suffering my family has caused her. The interview went viral. Commentators noted the remarkable sight of a patriarch turning against his own heir. They speculated about what had prompted such a dramatic break. Grace knew the truth. Richard Whitmore had destroyed his own wife decades ago, driving her to an early grave with the same tactics Adrian was attempting to use. He had spent 30 years living with that guilt, and he would not stand by and watch history repeat itself. Detective Sarah Cole held her own press conference. Our investigation into Adrian Whitmore has revealed a pattern of financial crimes spanning several years. We have evidence of offshore account transfers, asset concealment during divorce proceedings, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Additional charges may be forthcoming. Veronica Hale's arrest at JFK Airport made national news. She had been stopped at the gate with a one-way ticket to Costa Rica and $200,000 in cash that did not belong to her. Her mugshot showed a woman unrecognizable from the confident predator who had poured wine on Grace at the gala. Her eyes were puffy from crying. Her hair was disheveled. Her expression held the hollow disbelief of someone whose fantasy had shattered against the hard wall of reality. Throughout it all, Grace stayed quiet. She did not give interviews. She did not post on social media. She focused on her health, her babies, and the legal proceedings that would determine her future. Catherine Ashford handled everything else. The divorce settlement was finalized in record time. Adrian, facing criminal charges and desperate to avoid additional scrutiny, agreed to terms he never would have considered under normal circumstances. Grace received the penthouse, though she chose not to keep it. She received a significant financial settlement, enough to ensure her children would never want for anything. Most importantly, she received full custody. Adrian's parental rights were suspended pending the outcome of his criminal trial. The conspiracy to institutionalize his pregnant wife and take their children had been thoroughly documented. No judge in the country would grant him unsupervised access after seeing that evidence. 3 months after the night that changed everything, Grace moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn that she had chosen herself. It was smaller than the penthouse, less impressive, less designed to impress, but it was hers. She painted the nursery in soft greens and yellows, just as she had planned. She assembled the cribs with her own hands, refusing to let Marcus do it for her, even when he insisted. She hung the curtains and arranged the stuffed animals and stood in the finished room, feeling something she had not felt in years: peace. The twins arrived 3 weeks early, but healthy. Oliver came first, already crying before he was fully born, announcing his presence to the world with characteristic impatience. Charlotte followed 4 minutes later, quieter but just as determined, her eyes seeming to take in everything around her with unusual focus. Grace held them both in her arms and wept. Not from pain, not from fear, not from any of the emotions that had defined the past months. She wept from love so overwhelming it felt like her heart would burst from containing it. "You are safe now," she whispered to them. "Both of you, I promise you will always be safe." Marcus appeared in the doorway of the hospital room, and for a moment the hardened veteran looked like he might cry himself. "They are beautiful." His voice was rough. "They look just like you." Grace smiled through her tears. "Come meet your niece and nephew." He crossed the room carefully, as though approaching something precious and fragile. When she placed Charlotte in his arms, his expression transformed into something she had never seen on her brother's face before: pure, uncomplicated wonder. "I'm going to teach them everything," he said quietly. "How to fight, how to protect themselves, how to spot a liar from across the room." Grace laughed softly. "Maybe start with how to hold their heads up first." Details. They stayed like that for a long moment. The four of them, a family unit that had been forged through fire and emerged stronger than steel. The trial would come. The final chapter of her story with Adrian would play out in courtrooms and headlines. But Grace was not worried anymore. She had survived the worst night of her life. She had fought back against a system designed to silence her. She had protected her children and rebuilt her life from the ashes of her marriage. Whatever came next, she could handle it, because she finally knew who she was. Not Adrian's wife, not a victim, not the woman who had lost everything. She was Grace Eleanor Bennett, mother of two, survivor, fighter, and she was just getting started. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every eye fixed on the proceedings. Reporters lined the back wall with notebooks ready. The story of Adrian Whitmore's fall had captured national attention, and everyone wanted to see how it ended. Grace sat in the gallery, Oliver and Charlotte at home with Marcus and a security team that had become family over the past months. She had debated whether to come. Part of her wanted to stay away, to let the justice system do its work without her presence. But another part of her needed to see this through. Adrian entered flanked by his attorneys. His tailored suit could not hide the toll the past months had taken. His face was gaunt. His eyes carried the hollow look of a man who had lost everything and still could not understand how it happened. He glanced toward Grace as he passed her row. For a moment, their eyes met. Grace saw no remorse in his gaze, no recognition of the pain he had caused, only bitterness and blame and the stubborn conviction that he was the real victim of this story. She looked away. Some people never learn. Some people are so convinced of their own righteousness that no amount of evidence can penetrate their delusion. Grace had spent years trying to reach Adrian, trying to find the good man she believed existed beneath the surface. She knew now that the man she had loved had never existed. He was a performance, a mask, a carefully constructed facade designed to manipulate everyone around him. The real Adrian Whitmore was exactly what he had revealed himself to be on that terrible night at Belvedere restaurant. Cold, cruel, incapable of seeing others as anything more than tools for his own use. The judge called the court to order. What followed was a systematic destruction of every lie Adrian had ever told. The prosecution presented the videos from the gala, each one showing Veronica's deliberate assault and Adrian's callous response. They played the audio recording of Adrian and Veronica planning Grace's institutionalization, their voices cold and calculating as they discussed how to steal children from their mother. They presented the financial records showing years of hidden assets and offshore transfers. They called witnesses who testified to Adrian's pattern of manipulation and deceit. They built a case so thorough, so overwhelming, that even his expensive attorneys could offer no meaningful defense. Adrian's testimony was a masterclass in denial. "I never intended to harm my wife." His voice carried the practiced sincerity of a lifelong liar. "Everything I did was out of concern for her mental health. The pregnancy was difficult. She was struggling. I only wanted to help her." The prosecutor was merciless. "You wanted to help her by recording conversations about taking her children. You wanted to help her by transferring marital assets to offshore accounts. You wanted to help her by filing psychiatric commitment papers before the incident even occurred." Adrian's mask slipped, revealing the fury beneath. She was unstable. Anyone could see it. Ask anyone who knew her. The prosecutor smiled grimly. "We did ask. 17 witnesses from the gala confirmed that your wife was calm and composed until your mistress assaulted her. 12 of your own employees confirmed that Mrs. Bennett was well-respected and mentally sound. Your own father testified that you were the one with the problem, not her." The color drained from Adrian's face. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Grace watched as the verdict was read. Guilty of financial fraud. Guilty of conspiracy. Guilty of attempting to falsely imprison his pregnant wife. Adrian stood motionless as the words washed over him. Then he turned, one final time, toward Grace. "This is your fault." His voice was a hiss, low enough that only those nearby could hear. "You destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family, my entire life. Hope you are satisfied." Grace rose from her seat. She walked toward him slowly, stopping just out of arm's reach. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. "I did not destroy anything, Adrian. I simply stopped helping you hide what you already were." She turned and walked out of the courtroom. Behind her, she heard the judge pronounce the sentence. 15 years, the minimum for his crimes. She did not look back. 6 months later, Grace stood on the porch of her Brooklyn brownstone. watching the twins sleep in their stroller. The autumn leaves were falling in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet street. Elena Martinez sat beside her, a glass of sparkling cider in hand. I still cannot believe you named her Charlotte. Elena's voice carried warm amusement. After all that drama, you gave her a fancy rich person name. Grace laughed. It was my grandmother's name. And besides, she's going to make it her own. Fair enough. Elena sipped her cider. How are you doing? Really? Grace considered the question carefully. I am tired, she admitted. Being a single mother to twins is exactly as exhausting as everyone warned me it would be. I miss sleep. I miss being able to go to the bathroom without an audience. I miss having a conversation that does not involve spit up or diaper changes. But, Grace smiled, I am also happier than I have been in years, maybe ever. I know who I am now. I know what I am capable of. And I know that whatever challenges come next, I can handle them. Marcus emerged from inside the house, phone pressed to his ear. His expression was serious, but there was a lightness in his eyes that had not been there a year ago. That was Catherine, he announced, ending the call. The nonprofit paperwork went through. Bennett Family Foundation is officially registered and operational. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. We did it. You did it, Marcus corrected. I just helped with the heavy lifting. The Bennett Family Foundation had been Grace's idea. A way to take everything she had learned from her experience and turn it into something that could help others. The foundation would provide legal support for women facing financial abuse, emergency housing for those fleeing dangerous relationships, counseling services for survivors rebuilding their lives. In the 6 months since its conception, they had already helped over 100 women escape situations similar to what Grace had endured. The doorbell rang. Marcus went to answer it, and Grace heard voices in the hallway. A moment later, he returned with a young woman behind him. She looked to be in her late 20s, with dark hair and eyes that held the particular wariness of someone who had learned not to trust. Grace, Marcus said quietly, this is Sarah. She needs help. Grace rose from her chair and crossed the porch to stand before the young woman. Sarah, she said gently, would you like to sit down? We have a lot to talk about. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, unable to speak. Grace guided her to a chair, pressed a glass of water into her trembling hands, and sat down beside her. Start at the beginning, Grace said softly. Tell me everything. And as Sarah began to speak, Grace listened with the full attention of someone who understood exactly what she was going through, who had walked the same path, who had survived the same darkness. The sun continued to set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Oliver stirred in his stroller, making the small sounds that signaled approaching hunger. Charlotte slept on, oblivious to everything but her dreams. Life continued, imperfect, complicated, beautiful. Grace thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, the betrayal that had nearly destroyed her, the strength she had discovered within herself, the people who had stood beside her when she needed them most. She thought about the women she would help, the lives she would change, the ripples of her own survival spreading outward to touch people she would never meet. And she thought about the lesson that had taken her 32 years to learn. No power can bury the truth forever. No amount of money can purchase a clear conscience. No carefully constructed lie can withstand the weight of accumulated evidence. The truth always finds a way. It had found its way through the chaos of that terrible night at Bella's Vita restaurant. It had found its way through the hospital room where they tried to imprison her mind. It had found its way through courtrooms and headlines in the testimony of people brave enough to speak. And now it was finding its way through Grace herself, through the work she was doing, through the life she was building, through the children she was raising, to recognize deception and value honesty and stand up for what was right even when it was hard. Sarah finished her story. Grace took her hand. You are not alone anymore, Grace said. And you are not crazy. What you experienced was real. What you felt was valid. And you are going to get through this. How do you know? Grace smiled, thinking of everything she had survived, everything she had overcome, everything that still lay ahead. Because I did. And if I can do it, so can you. The last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. The streetlights flickered on. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked and a dog barked, and the city continued its endless symphony of life. Grace Bennett sat on her porch, surrounded by the people she loved, looking forward to a future she had built with her own hands. She was not the woman she had been a year ago. She was stronger, wiser, more certain of her own worth. And she was ready for whatever came next, because the truth had set her free. And freedom, Grace had learned, was worth fighting for. The end.